Well, good evening, everyone. Wanted to take a look at the forecast breakdown, looking for the potential for severe weather on Friday, but wanted to start off looking at the radar and kind of a historic flooding event that's actually going on in, of all places, Florida right now. So, right around the Fort Lauderdale, Florida area, almost all day, they've had these a couple different storms, even tornado warnings at time. It actually was tornado warned a minute ago. It looks like they've dropped that warning, but some pretty incredible street flooding and rainfall rates that's been occurring. And so wanted to show the radar here. Again, we've got kind of Miami down here. We've got Fort Lauderdale under this flash flood emergency currently. And so let me put this into motion for us here, kind of over the last bit. We can see these storms that kind of just really don't hardly move. They just kind of stay over the same area. We've got another one here kind of off the coast and really producing some pretty incredible and prolific rainfall events here. And I think the easiest way to really be able to see this is if we go to the total accumulation. This looks at really over the last basically bit of time as the storm has been producing rain over this area. This will allow us to show we're looking at about 20.5 inches of rain just south of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, along the coast here, these kind of bright red colors here. So again, we're not that far off from 2 feet of rain that's fallen in the last 10 or so hours here across this part of really southeastern Florida. So pretty incredible rain events. Saw some video on social media of streets flooding, the airport flooding, and really certainly a dangerous situation here. So pretty crazy rainfall event that's occurring there in Florida. So just wanted to kind of start off by looking at that. Another thing that's been interesting is we've had these supercells. Again, a minute ago, this was tornado warned over Fort Lauderdale. It looks like they've dropped that warning. But there is this storm off the coast here that does have some broad rotation just offshore here. It could be possibly producing a couple water spouts. And whenever you're looking for potential rotation in thunderstorms, really what you're looking for, this current radar that we're on here is the velocity. And so whenever you see this green color here, these are winds that are moving towards the radar station. And then these red colors are wind that's moving away from the radar station. And so anytime that you see these lighter green and red colors that are in close proximity to one another, that's where there tends to be much tighter rotation. And certainly that will give you the indication that that thunderstorm is rotating. And then if you start to see it really intensify and get very close together, that would show that there's possibly a tornado that's in progress. And so, right here, again, overall looks kind of broad. There's maybe a couple different areas where you could potentially see a brief spin up here. So, again, this is over the Atlantic, just offshore, but this storm could certainly move inland. And so, pretty interesting kind of event setting up here over Florida. Again, didn't want to spend too much time looking at just this. I do want to take a look here at some of the weather models and kind of take a look at Friday. So this is pivotal weather. This is looking at the Storm Prediction Center, their day 3 outlook. And so what we can see here is that we do have this area. Let me get my drawing tool here. We do have this area, this slight risk, so a 2 out of 5 risk across really from Dallas Fort Worth up to almost the Kansas City area, certainly Wichita, almost to Salina, Kansas here. So we do have this outlook listed here. And so I think that certainly there is a chance of severe weather. And again, this would be Friday late afternoon into the evening hours. Although, based on what I'm seeing with some of these models that, again, we'll take a look at here, I think that things aren't looking quite as robust. Let me get this off. I'm not sure why it's doing this to me. And so let's take a look here at the evening model runs. Let's take a look at the HRRR model and kind of see that the environment that it's kind of the picture that it's painting here for. Sorry, let me get this off for Friday evenings. Let me zoom in kind of to the Southern Plains region here. And I think first thing typically always want to look at is what are the dew points, what's the moisture content going to be. So if we go to around 7 p.m. on Friday, we can see that there is a dry line that's going to be setting up here, kind of across north central Texas into central Texas in the hill country. We do have dew points here across East Texas, North Texas along the Red River of kind of mid 60s down here in central to almost upper 60s in central Texas. Red River, kind of Dallas Fort Worth, looks like around low 60s. And then we do have those 60s stretching up kind of near the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. So there is a little bit of moisture, but this is going to be arriving relatively late in the day. So this would be potentially sufficient enough, but it may be just marginal enough on a moisture side of things that it may hold some of the more significant severe weather kind of at bay. So certainly moisture is one thing that we want to look at. Another thing that we always look at is where are those upper level winds. And so when we look here, this is at that jet stream level. So those 500 millibar winds, we do see a little bit of this flow, again, 45, 50 knots of flow in the upper atmosphere, kind of coming through western and kind of northwestern Texas here. So we do have enough energy certainly up in the atmosphere when we look at that low level jet, those lower level winds. We do see some of that kind of along the Red River here, not a whole lot in North Texas. Over Oklahoma, around 35, 36 knots of low level flow here. This would be enough, certainly, to see the potential for rotating thunderstorms and those supercells that could certainly support large hail and even a tornado threat. I think our biggest issue is going to be that we're going to have a pretty stout cap that's going to be in place for a lot of the day. When we look at that surface-based instability, we can see that there's certainly enough instability here along the dry line, even in North Texas, stretching up into north central Oklahoma here. But let's look at a couple of these soundings. Let's say kind of north central Oklahoma. Let's choose a sounding here. So what we can see here is that there is a slight capping inversion here, not anything significant, but anytime that this red line, this temperature here is on the right side of this white dash line, typically that's going to show air that is actually warmer above. And so if you have warm air that's rising, if the air is warmer above, it's really not going to have any incentive to move higher because it's kind of already warmer, and it's kind of that warm layer, that cap. So typically what you need there to not be any type of a cap or a lid on the atmosphere. And so again, what we're seeing here is a slight cap. And again, this is kind of north central Oklahoma. Let's look right along the Red River here. Again, a little bit more of a significant cap, that red line that goes kind of out and above that dashed white line. And then when we look a little bit further, kind of south of DFW here, let's take another sounding. Again, a little bit of that capping inversion. This isn't something that's overly significant. Certainly, we've seen caps that have eroded that have been worse than this in the past. So I definitely think that the atmosphere could support severe weather. And if we get any storms that can break through this kind of warm air cap that we have on the atmosphere, certainly we have a lot of instability that's present anywhere between this white dash line and the red line. This is instability here. We've got a 65-degree dew point here in kind of north central Texas. We do have enough turning in the lowest levels to have a tornado threat, certainly. So if we can get a storm, which I think possibly is going to be a big if, we would have the potential to have certainly severe weather, damaging winds, hail, and even an isolated tornado threat. It's just really going to come down to, do we get any storms? Another thing that I did want to take a look at here is a different kind of parameter that can be helpful to look at on severe weather days to see, will you get isolated storms or will they really just form a big line? And so what this looks at is when we look at that dry line that's kind of setting up. So this would be the dry line kind of along this edge right here. And then we've got these little wind barbs here. And typically, if you want to see some isolated storms, those supercells, more of a tornado threat, you want to see storms that are moving perpendicular to that boundary. And so what we can see here is that the dry line sets up pretty north to south. There's a little bit of a bulge here, but relatively north to south here across north central Texas into kind of central Oklahoma as well. And then we have winds that overall are moving in a very perpendicular, a 90-degree angle to that dry line. And so any storms that do fire along this dry line that can break through that cap, they will likely stay separate from one another. And so you won't have this big line of thunderstorms like we've seen in previous weeks. That does tend to reduce a little bit of that tornado threat. And so I think what we're looking at for Friday, given all of the parameters that we've looked at, is likely an environment that possibly could be complete sunshine and maybe we don't get any storms. But if we do get a couple storms, likely going to be maybe, one, two, three, not a huge outbreak. But if you get a storm that fires, it definitely would have the opportunity, given the environment, there's enough moisture, enough speed shear in the atmosphere with the changing winds with height, that we could see certainly an all modes severe weather hazard, even the potential of an isolated tornado. So definitely bears worth watching here moving forward. Again, could be an environment where we just get a pretty warm day and that cap is sufficient to really keep a lid on the atmosphere and maybe we don't get any storms. But I think there's definitely a threat that we could, and if any storms do fire, we would expect those to be severe and certainly would present an opportunity for a chase here. So I'll be watching things closely. Stay tuned to certainly the National Weather Service. They'll be posting updates here moving forward, and I'll try to post a couple updates as well. But could see some severe weather on Friday. It looks like Saturday it's going to move further into the kind of Arklatex, into the Mississippi Valley to the east of kind of the Southern Plains region here. So could see some severe weather there on Saturday, but I think it's going to be a marginal threat for Friday. The cap may be strong enough to hold back storms across Texas and Oklahoma. We'll have to see as we get a little bit closer, but certainly a pretty crazy weather day there in Fort Lauderdale, and that significant flooding and a couple tornado warnings there. So again, definitely stay safe. Keep alert to the changing kind of forecast here, especially in the Southern Plains region, and I'll try to keep you updated with a couple more videos and different posts across social media. So hope everyone has a good Wednesday night, and thanks for tuning in.